I really wanted to share and convey what becoming more extroverted has given me because I feel like it's been a tremendous benefit, that it's really changed the way I see the world, and that I'm a much better and happier person because of it. And so, because it's given me so much, that's been a big inspiration for me to help share this journey with others, right? Because I feel like I'm not that special, that unique to where my experiences couldn't be similar to others' experiences, right? I feel like if others went through the same thing that I went through, that some of them at least would also kind of get that same sort of joy that I've gotten. And so I really wanted to dig into that, into the reasons why, and what I've learned along the way, right? And I guess a good place to start is what change in me prompted me to start becoming more of an extrovert, to think of that as something that could happen, because I always had thought of myself as an introvert. And it wasn't until someone kind of shared an example of how an extrovert would feel. And that really got me to start thinking, huh, maybe I would feel that same way if I were in that same situation, right? They kind of described, um, maybe it's your birthday and you have all your friends around and it's easy to laugh and joke with them. And then because you all are having so much fun, others see that and kind of want to come up and join the party or be interested in hanging around, seeing what you're talking about. And, maybe seeing you all laughing and they start smiling, laughing because the good vibes are a bit contagious. And I didn't feel like I had that sort of reference experience that was like coming to mind, but it really got me to thinking, huh, maybe if I did have all my friends around, if we were all laughing and joking, if other people saw it and started coming in, like that would be something I really enjoyed and that would be something that energized me, right? Because I feel like definitionally people kind of conceptualize and think of introverts as someone who gets energy from being alone, and extroverts as someone who gets energy from being around others. But what this really got me to start thinking was, would there be certain situations around others that could also give me energy? Right. And so it wasn't just, I don't get energy from this, but what, I don't get energy from being around others, but instead it was more of a, what situation could be engineered in a way where others are around and I am still getting energy, right? And I feel like that was a more nuanced way of looking at it, but in looking at it that way, in thinking about how to answer that question, it got me to start thinking, well, maybe there are some situations where I could be around others and still be gaining energy, right? And it's not the case that any introvert being around any person will be draining. I'm very close to my family and can spend time around them and feel joy and feel much better because of it. So it wasn't the case that always around everyone, just being around them or talking to them was draining, but it was the case that many situations around many people, particularly people I didn't know as well, would be more challenging, more draining, more of a sense that it felt like work, right? And so as I started thinking about this and ways to, like I said, kind of create these situations where I could be around others and still be gaining energy, that started me on a path of seeking, right? Seeking more information, seeking more knowledge, seeking others who had potentially felt the way I did, but changed, right? And there's some great resources for that. Channels like this, I'm not the only one that shares this sort of content. Of course, I have my own unique perspective, but there are others out there, right? There are alternatives, substitutes, whatever you want to call it, however you want to think of it, there are others out there who can help, right? And it doesn't just have to be via a video like this. It could be in a book, right? You read a book and gain some information from that book. It could also be, a podcast that you're listening to that helps to kind of shift your mindset a little bit or change your perspective a little bit, open you up. Um, the only caveat I would throw in there is that what this journey has also taught me is that there is difference between knowledge and wisdom, right? That there are plenty of resources out there that can help you start to learn, but using these resources to start to learn is different from learning through experience, right? And connecting with others, I feel like, is an act that you do, right? It's not something that you take a test on. So it's not just having enough knowledge will lead to better results. There is a kind of performance aspect to it, right? Of actually having to do this, actually having to open your mouth and talk and come up with words to say, for example. And so these resources are tremendously helpful. They definitely help me to help to shift my mindset, help me to start asking different questions of myself, like the one I share. However, I do feel like this has to be combined with some action, right? With going out there and talking to others more, right? And it can start small, of course. That's something I advocate for is, start small and increase from there. For me, one of the things was just even taking the headphones out a little bit more. That out in social spaces, going for a walk or in the store or something, I'd have my headphones in, and it was for me a clear sign to others of like, hey, I'd rather keep to myself. Um, but just going around without the headphones in as much was was like at the edge of my comfort zone, right? And I feel like the edge of your comfort zone is also the edge of great growth, right? And so if you can push your comfort zone, expand your comfort zone, then you really are growing to a great degree. But back to what I'm talking about earlier with how this has helped me, what it has given me, right? What it has given me is this change in perspective and this change in mindset, right? And it started with just kind of questioning and seeking. But as I started going on this journey, as I started going out more, as I started talking to people in different situations, I ran into different areas where I could see that my current mindset or perspective was holding me back in certain ways, or right, or where I was coming up against certain things that made me uncomfortable. And I really had to think about, okay, why is this making me uncomfortable? And how can I get to where I want to go without this level of discomfort, right? How can I get to where I want to go being comfortable and having it be fun, but also still growing, right? And again, I mentioned that I do think this will take a certain amount of pushing your comfort zone, expanding your comfort zone. But for me, it also took a good bit of introspection and reflection, right? So, for example, one thing that I felt often when going out is that I'd see other groups of people talking to each other. And I was very hesitant to go up and start a conversation with people who were already in a conversation because I felt like I was interrupting them or being a bother or that I was kind of getting in the way of what they wanted, right? Hey, they're probably talking to their friends. They came out to enjoy a night with their friends. And so by me coming up, inserting myself into the conversation, I am being a bother, right? And so I really had to examine this and question this if I wanted to grow, right? Because I kept bumping up against this discomfort, right? And so one of the things shifts that helped me with this was someone kind of shared with me, it was a coach actually who kind of shared, you're feeling this way because of a reflection of feeling like you are taking, right? That you're going up to them and taking some of their fun, taking some of their enjoyment. Whereas if you felt you were really giving, if you were adding to their night, adding to the fun, adding to their enjoyment, adding to their experience, then you wouldn't feel so hesitant to go up and start a conversation, right? And so this, I felt like I could, from a knowledge standpoint, from a distant viewpoint, understand the point that was being made. But from a feeling viewpoint, right, from what really made me comfortable, from how I really felt that I was coming off, what really resonated with me internally, it took some time, effort, work to start to make that change and shift in perspective. And it took certain experiences, right? It took me going out, pushing through that discomfort, talking with some people, and realizing, seeing the smiles on their face, hearing them laugh, having them ask to connect and follow up and see me again, to make me understand and really realize and appreciate, you know what, I have added to their experience, right? I have helped them enjoy the night. They did have more fun in having a conversation with me than they would have without the conversation with me. And that experience again helped reinforce some of this other work I was doing in terms of reframing my beliefs and rethinking my value, right? And this is deep work. And I feel like this is truly one of the benefits of becoming an extrovert, right? I began to challenge how I saw myself, how I was showing up, and some of these beliefs that were keeping me on the path that I had been on, right? In challenging those things, I feel like I expanded, I grew more, right? And I felt like it also changed my belief about myself and my value and how I could add to others, right? This may not be for everyone, and me even saying it, others may have kind of a visceral, ooh, not me reaction. Um, I would say first, check, make sure that's not just your ego flaring up. But what I saw in myself was this sense of I am not adding value to others outside of specific situations, right? And that was part of my hesitation in interacting with others, right? The sense that maybe I'm not adding to their lives. Maybe I'm not adding to the fun. Maybe I'm taking away from it. Maybe I am being more of a taker than more of a giver. And so the first thing that I kind of thought about with that is, okay, well, what could I do? How could I change to be more of a giver and less of a taker? Right. And one of the things within that was being able to recognize the emotional states of others and relate to them, right? I feel like one thing that adds to others is a sense of being understood and of being heard, right? This empathy that I've talked about in some of my other videos. And seeing going out, becoming more extroverted, interacting with others as a practice in empathizing with others, seeing understanding others as a goal of interacting with others helped also shift my perspective from not just what can I get out of it? What am I getting out of this journey? But how can I add to others, right? How can I help them feel heard? How can I help them be understood? How can I be an outlet for whatever they're feeling, right? That is valuable, right? That has been valuable. And that is something that becoming more extroverted, becoming more social has allowed me to do to a much greater degree, right? And it's very hard for me to speak to this or to put it in words, but I'm so much better at looking at someone, seeing the look on their face, and understanding what they're feeling now than I was in the past, right? That sometimes it's even just without words, this understanding of, I get how you're feeling, right? And when you can do that and then add the words on top, add the emotions on top, sometimes help them shift from a certain emotional place to a place where they would rather be, that is tremendous value, right? That is something that they often remember long after the interaction you've had with them. There are so many instances where I go out and now people say, "Hey, I remember you from, a month ago," or, you know, something I felt like I was just saying in passing, like just part of me kind of blabbering on. They come back and say, for example, a week later, going to some events that are kind of every week, come back a week later and say, "Hey, I really thought about what you said, and that helped me in some way." And to feel that is adds to my own joy, right? Adds to my own good vibes, adds to my own sense of self-esteem, sense of value, sense of purpose, right? I think to a certain degree, everyone would like to be helpful to others, maybe not to the entire world all the time, but there are some people who we care about or would like to care about. And when we can feel like we've really helped them, it helps us feel good, right? It helps us go through life, knowing that we're productive members of society or of our community, of our friend group, of our family. And so being able to see and elicit more examples of this has helped to build me up, has helped to give me more motivation, more encouragement, has helped me to keep going on. Where in the beginning, when I was just starting out, it felt like work, right? It felt like a challenge. It felt arduous, like it was something I was forcing myself to do. And so this shift in being able to read people is valuable in so many different settings, right? I often go out to public spaces and, start conversations with strangers, right? But this shift has knock-on effects and compound effects across all of my relationships, right? With my friends, I'm better able to see and understand how they're feeling without them even verbalizing it. With my family, I'm better able to understand how they are feeling, what they're thinking, maybe what they're hesitant to say, and kind of address those things. In terms of dating and relationships, I feel like I've had more success there because of being able to see states of others, help them have a good time, help them enjoy the experience. And that's led to more friendships, more new friends, more people wanting to spend time with me, right? Even in the business sense, right? Part of why I also got into becoming more social and more extroverted was that I'd had a small business that I wanted to get funding for. And so I knew I was going to have to be going out and kind of selling my idea, pitching the business. And I realized that that was not something that I felt like was my strong suit, right? I felt like I was much more of an analytical thinker, that my data skills were supreme, and I didn't really desire to even be, a CEO or out marketing or that sort of thing. But because I felt like this was important for the business, because I felt like this would help my business grow, because I felt like this was a skill that would be useful over time, I thought to myself, well, I got to start doing it in some way and somehow, right? And even starting out, that's what it was going out to the different business networking events and talking to other people who also had small businesses, you know, occasionally talking to angel investors or things like that. And so this social journey, becoming more extroverted, learning how to connect and communicate with others on a deeper, more enriching level, it doesn't just have to be, about dating. It doesn't just have to be about networking and getting a new job. It doesn't just have to be about finding more friends, right? It can be all of those things and more, right? And that is really the part of the value and part of the reward of this that I didn't even realize or appreciate getting into it, right? I thought it would help me in this kind of small area, but now I'm seeing it help me here and here and here and here. And so it's helped me just grow in so many different ways that I feel like I'm getting back many times more than what I've put in. And that's something that will continue for years and years to come. Granted, I'm able to see out those years. So, connecting with others, huge. Examining these kind of limiting beliefs or shifts in perspective within myself and how I could change that perspective to start relating to the world and to others in a different way. That has been huge. And again, I want to harp on the point that this also in the beginning was not something that was comfortable. I really felt like this is not me. This is not who I am. And so that's why this is so uncomfortable. And that's why I haven't done it. That's why when I'm going out and forcing myself to do it, it is so hard. It is work because I know this isn't something I want to do. I know it's not me. Again, it took some shifts. It took some time. It took doing it anyway. It took me finding others and learning from others to push through that and really change my perspective, right? Really see that it wasn't changing who I am, that it was adding to who I am, right? It wasn't changing how I show up in certain situations. It was giving myself more options with how I could show up in certain situations, right? I still have the ability and capacity to be as introverted as I ever was, right? There's still a huge part of me that gains energy from being alone. That hasn't gone away. I haven't shied away from that. I haven't tried to kick it out or put it in the closet, under the stairwell. But what I do have is more range, more options, right? More ability now, and I can choose. I can be the introvert that stays in for a week-long staycation and enjoy that. I can also be the extrovert that goes out on a vacation alone, meets people, and ends up having a great night every night that I go out. So this growth isn't about changing who you are, changing your personality. It's about taking yourself to that next level, giving yourself more options, giving yourself more freedom, right? And that extra freedom, that extra confidence, that extra ability, that extra dimension is huge and has been, again, very, very rewarding. Like I said, it's changed the way I see the world, right? It's made me kind of re-examine these different beliefs that I hear from others in society or in conversations or things like that, and really have the experience to know that I see why you think that because I've thought that as well. And I also see how I have changed and grown past that, right? I see that, hey, you may think introversion is just part of who you are, something that you're born with, something that can't be changed. I used to feel the same way for many years. I used to live that way. I get it. Also, I have become more extroverted. And so I also see where that belief that this introversion is just who I am, who I always will be, I see how that can be limiting, right? I see how that belief can then cause you to not even assess the question of how could I become more extroverted if I wanted to, right? And when you don't ask that question, you don't then find the answer to it, right? That is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. And I've seen that with so many of my beliefs that I believed a certain thing, and so I acted a certain way. And in acting that way and believing that thing, I was closed off to other opportunities. As I've expanded my beliefs, as I've given myself different options, these different opportunities, these different paths have opened up to me. And I can still choose the same path that I was on before, but now I have these other options, right? And with these other options, it can lead to better results financially, relationship wise. And really, the area I want to get into next is spiritually as well, right? This journey to becoming more extroverted has been a growing development learning path, right? And along this path, as I've been seeking out different wisdom, I have found it, right? And part of the sources where I found this wisdom is in different spiritual texts or teachings or beliefs, right? And I'm not someone that has ever thought of myself as religious, but I would also say I'm closer to that now than before. And again, I don't see it as distance from who I was before. I see it as an uncovering of who I was, right? That my belief before was kind of like, yeah, I've heard enough about this religion or that religion to know there are certain parts of it I don't agree with. And hey, maybe you agree with some parts, but there are some parts that you perhaps shouldn't agree with, right? Now, what I see is wisdom can come from anywhere. Good ideas can come from anywhere. And part of the value of these religious and spiritual texts that have been around for thousands of years is that they have wisdom that has been examined at a very deep level, right? At kind of a beyond physiological level, right? And seeing and experiencing that wisdom and seeing how certain principles and teachings have applied to my life and can be applied to my life and how I would like them to be applied to my life has really shown me, again, not that this prior belief was a bad one, not that I've really changed from that, but that it's a little bit more nuanced than I was thinking before, right? That where before it was more of just a white and black sort of thing, now it's more of a, white and black or good and bad. Now it's more of a spectrum, and that there are different places along the spectrum. And it's not that I've changed, but it's really that I've gone deeper into who I was, right? And that is part of the value that this extroverted journey has given me as well, as I feel like I often talk about it as relating to others, connecting with others, empathizing with others, but also so much of what it has given me is a more fuller, truer sense of self, sense of who I am, right? Again, that before, oh, I'm just this introvert. That's the way I am. That's the way I'll always be. That's just who I am, my personality, right? In seeing that, well, hey, actually, in different situations, I can be more extroverted. Hey, actually, I can develop this ability to interact with others, start conversations with others, feel less fearful when I'm out, bring a good time, bring the vibes. It's been a journey into who I am as a person, what really resonates with me, right? It's unlocked different parts of my being, of my personality, of my sense of self. And I think they were always there, but they were just so far below the surface that I couldn't see them, couldn't connect with them, couldn't relate to them. And this experience has allowed me to do so to a much greater degree, right? So between connecting with others, having a greater sense of self, feeling like I'm growing, developing, having more friends, having better relationships, being able to be honest and open up to open up and connect with how I'm feeling and relate that to others in a way that they can understand. These have all been huge, huge benefits. The other thing I'm just going to mention as well that, is obviously coming to mind, but I haven't mentioned it up till now, I don't believe. It's just I have way more fun, right? Like times where I was as bored before, like I can go out and do more stuff now, right? And that's even big part of it as well. Some things that were maybe uncomfortable or not fun before have become fun now. Before even the idea of going out to a bar or a club kind of repulsed me. I felt like the people there are not my people. I would not connect with them. Now it's like I can find people anywhere who I connect with. I can bring the fun anywhere. I can have great conversations anywhere. And doing that has allowed me to have much more fun. Of course, I still have much more fun with myself when I'm alone. And part of that is even, I kind of touched on it earlier, alluded to it earlier, is how I am processing different things that happen in the world, right? Something that maybe used to frustrate me at work, I can now dismiss more easily because I have a greater control and freedom and flexibility in my emotions and in how I feel. And I feel like I'm able to better understand others, how they're thinking, how they're feeling, how they react to certain situations or certain pressures. And so I also have this empathy that allows me to forgive and forget that much more easily. Right. And so in the extroverted senses, I'm having more fun, the extroverted environments, places, situations, but also in the introverted ones as well. And so this journey has been tremendously helpful. It's been eye-opening, it's been life-changing, it's been expansive in so many ways. And I hope that this video is insightful to you and potentially even inspiring to you because I feel like if others could grow in the same way that I have, of course they would go through the journey as well, right? The rewards more than outweigh the efforts. And that's what's prompted me to keep going and going and going. And that's why it's something I'm not giving up, right? And so I understand everyone's in different places. I myself was not ready for this sort of thing. I'd been exposed to some of the ideas, some of the same teachers and coaches that, I've worked with now, I knew about years before and did not resonate with. It wasn't a part of my focus, wasn't on my radar. And even when it was kind of on my radar, when it came up, was not something I gravitated towards, was not something I felt was interesting, was not something I felt would add to me. Now I have this different perspective, right? And because it's been so great for me, that's why I'm sharing it with you. That's why I hope for those who are ready to go on this journey, you will continue with it because as you push through, as you make more progress, it gets more easy, it gets more fun, it gets more rewarding. And I want that for you because it's been so great for me. So I wish you the very best and thank you.